Well, hello to all of my diabetes out there in the web world. My name is Emily. I'm one of the diabetes educators here at Children's, and I am here to take you through our Pump 101 class today. So, welcome. Just a little background on me. I have been a pump user since 2005, and it's been just amazing to watch how pumps have changed over the last 15 years. The last 5 years, there's been incredible development in the technology and software available, and it is just an incredible time in diabetes to pursue pump therapy. So welcome. I'm excited to walk you through this and get you prepared for your journey with pumps. Alrighty, so I'm going to get my screen shared with you all. You can view this PowerPoint. We do have our PowerPoint available for you to print off on your own. You can take notes as needed and use it also for review. All right, so let me get you viewing my PowerPoint. All righty. Here we go. Pump 101. All right, so our class objectives for today. At the end of class, we would like you to be able to explain the difference between pump therapy and what you are currently doing, multiple daily injections, or what we call MDI. We want you to understand the risk for ketone development and how to use the decay prevention decision tree for pumps. We want you to understand the variety of pumps available on the market today and identify the steps to obtain an insulin pump. So just a quick kind of forward thought on this. After this class, if you are interested in pursuing a pump, you do need to complete our pump assessment worksheets. These are just to ensure that you do understand thoroughly what a pump is, how it works, truly, confirm that you do want a pump. So the worksheets are pretty in-depth and pretty detailed. So I would recommend, if you haven't looked at them yet, to press pause on this video and then take a look at those worksheets. Give them a little review before watching this video because it may be easier to fill them out if you know what you're really going to be paying attention to. All right, here we go. So first things first, what even is an insulin pump? Why are we even looking at them? So an insulin pump, it is a small medical device and it delivers rapid acting insulin 24 hours a day through a small little catheter that's placed under the skin. And pumps have actually been around for longer than we usually know. So the first pump actually came out in 1978. And as you can see in this picture, it was an ordeal to wear it. You had this big backpack on. You had to have two different IVs running. It wasn't just this subcutaneous catheter that was placed. It was a real IV. So it was a big ordeal to be on a pump. As things progress, pumps have gotten smaller and smaller. And here, I don't know when this photo was taken, but it was when pumps were the size to attach to an IV pole to bring around with you. And then we'll fast forward all the way to today. And on the right side here, these are 3 different pump models that are available in the US. So the bottom left one, the little T on it, that is the Tandem X2 pump. To right above it is the little white looking thing with the black controller. That is the Omnipod pump. And then to the right is the Medtronic pump. So those are the 3 different models that are on the market today. And in addition to this class, we do have a separate pump and sensor options video that will go into the various brands of what's available and the details of those. So that is also recommended that you watch that before moving forward in this journey. All right, so to understand the difference between multiple daily injections and insulin pump therapy. So first things first, you're still getting insulin, and both modes of therapy utilize basal bolus therapy. So what is basal bolus therapy? Well, to get there, we need to do a quick pathophysiology and insulin review. And I know you're probably rolling your eyes. Oh, groan review. I know diabetes. I know. But it is really important that we understand these things in depth so that we understand how these pumps work. All right, so quick diabetes pathophysiology review. So our bodies need energy to function every day, day in, day out. And the primary source of fuel, our primary source of energy, is sugar. How do we get sugar? We get sugar from the food that we eat, primarily carbohydrates. And then the other thing that we get sugar from is from our liver and muscle stores. So if you remember, depending on when you were diagnosed, if you recently had your initial education class or not, but our pancreases are designed to create two different hormones to balance blood sugar levels. The first is insulin, which you guys are very familiar with using. And then the second one we often forget is glucagon. So the pancreas actually creates glucagon, which raises blood sugar. After the pancreas creates glucagon, it gets stored in our muscles and in our liver as glucose. And those stores are there so that between meals, when our body is needing energy to breathe, to walk, to blink, for our heart to beat, the liver and muscles can release little bits of glucose into the bloodstream so that our energy is kept up, our body can keep functioning between those meals. And so this image on the right side here, this is a great picture of just how that is happening. So you may recognize this photo, but the red part is a bloodstream. Green G's are glucose or sugar molecules. And then on the right side is that cell. Our body is made of cells. Every single cell needs energy to function and survive. And so then on the left side, you are seeing those muscles. We got glucagon and glucose stores in the muscles as well as the liver. And they are putting out little bits of glucose molecules into the bloodstream to enter in through the cells and be used for energy. Then, of course, that lovely graph on that bottom left showing, blood sugar level gets boosted when we eat, and then it gets boosted a little bit from our muscles and liver stores between meals. Okay, so if you guys remember too, on our cells, to get the energy, to get that glucose into the cells for energy, all of the cells have doors open and shut. And those doors need to be open to allow the glucose to be pulled out of the blood and go into the cells. All right, so quick insulin review. So this image is relatively similar to the last one, but it's showing us a little bit different things. So now we're seeing our pancreas, and our pancreas creates that really important hormone insulin, brings blood sugar down. And insulin acts as a key to open those receptor doors. Without insulin, our cell doors, those receptor doors, are completely shut. Glucose cannot enter without insulin. So insulin is super important for our bodies to get energy to function and survive. So when we're talking about the different types of insulin, right now you're on two different types of insulin, your basal insulin and your bolus insulin. Our basal insulin, that's our background insulin, it's acting as a doorstop. So our basal insulin is keeping those receptor doors propped open just a little bit so that when the liver and our muscles release bits of glucose, that glucose can enter into the cells and be used for energy. So that is the purpose of our basal insulin. It is a doorstop. Our bolus insulin opens that door a little bit wider to let higher glucose stores get into the cells. And so that's when we are eating, or if our blood sugar is just higher than we want it, we'll give bolus insulin to open that door wider, let more glucose into the cell. All right, so back to basal bolus therapy, MDI versus pump therapy. So basal insulin, what we just talked about, it's that background insulin used to meet the metabolic needs of the body. So in MDI, it is an injection that we give once or twice daily, depending on which brand of long-acting insulin you're on. So that may be Lantus, Basaglar, Levemir, Tresiba, could be Toujeo. There's a lot out there. So that probably sounds familiar to you. You can identify with whichever brand you use. And then our basal insulin. So when we're on a pump, how are we meeting that metabolic need in our body? So the pump, we actually only use one type of insulin in. We only use rapid acting insulin in the pump. And the pump will give a little tiny dose of insulin every 3 to 5 minutes continuously, goes 24/7. And so that is the pump's way of letting that rapid acting insulin act as that doorstop, keeping those doors propped open to let the glucose stores from your liver and your muscles enter into the cells. So that's kind of really one of the big differences between injections and pump therapy is you're only using one type of insulin. So then our bolus insulin, so this is our additional insulin that we're giving for meals and blood sugar correction. You guys are familiar with this. So in MDI, this is an injection, might be syringe or pen, and different brands available, Humalog, Novolog, Viasp, Apidra, those are the most common ones. In a pump, you're going to continue using those insulins. We usually use Humalog or Novolog in pumps. Viasp and Apidra can be a little finicky with pumps, so if you are a Viasp or Apidra user, please let us know so we can help guide you to figure out which pump will work for you. But so with the pump, for your bolus insulin, you pull your pump out through a sequence of buttons. You're able to deliver that meal bolus or correction bolus. So really big takeaway here, when we're on our pump, we are not taking our long-acting insulin. No more Lantus, no more Basaglar, Tresiba, Toujeo, Levemir. We're not taking it anymore because then we'd be doubling up our background basal insulin and you'd be low all the time. So basal insulin gets stopped when you're on the pump. The pump will provide a basal rate in the background, which we'll get into to provide or to meet those metabolic needs of the body. All right, so parts of an insulin pump. So this slide specifically pertains to a typical pump, a tubed pump, what people are used to seeing. At the beginning here, I said there's those three brands that are on the market right now, Medtronic, Tandem, and Omnipod. And so the tubed pump options are Medtronic and Tandem. So this slide pertains to those two brands. All right, parts of an insulin pump. There are three parts. First one, it's the pump. The pump itself is what is controlling your insulin delivery. The next really important part of a pump is an infusion set. And an infusion set is a small cannula. It's placed under the skin and into fatty tissue with a needle. This is where insulin gets delivered 24/7. And to insert it, you use a thing that kind of looks like this on the screen. That is an insertion device. There are various types of infusion sets, so they may vary a little bit depending on which one you select. But typically there is a device that helps you put them in. If you are a CGM user, it's very similar to that where it's a preloaded product. You press a button and it inserts. The nice thing is the needle does get retracted, so then you just have a thin plastic cannula left under the skin for insulin delivery. So in this image, you can see this top right image. The flat white piece, that's the adhesive holding the infusion set onto the skin. And then if you can see, there's a little tiny line coming down at a 90-degree angle, and that is the cannula. So that is where the insulin is infusing through to get into the fatty tissue. And in real life, this is kind of a typical size. I don't know how well you can see this on there, but typical size of an infusion set. So pretty small, which is really nice. Now, an important part here is you're on a tubed pump. This infusion set's connected to your body. Tubing is going to connect you to the pump. But what's nice is if you are bathing, if you are swimming, if there's any time that you need to take your pump off, you don't have to rip this entire thing off and reinsert. You can simply, sorry, the coloring's not great, so you can't quite see it, but you can simply remove your tubing. This piece gets attached into the infusion set so that it's removable. And then when you're ready to reconnect, gotta line this up. When you're ready to reconnect, you just clip back in. So it is nice. You have some flexibility there to disconnect from your pump if you need to. All right, third part of our insulin pump is the reservoir or cartridge. Depends which brand you have, what it's called. So this is what one kind of looks like, one of the brands. So our reservoir is what is holding the insulin. And each brand holds between 200 and 300 units of insulin. what we do is we are actually going to fill the reservoir with insulin, and we can use vials, we can use our pens, we can use whatever we're using right now to fill the reservoirs. We do fill the reservoirs with only 2 to 3 days worth of insulin, not the entire 200 to 300 units unless you're using that much in 2 to 3 days. So then your reservoir gets placed into the pump and connected to your infusion set by tubing. And this is just if you're using one of the tubed pumps. Really important thing is both your infusion sets and your reservoirs. These do get changed every 2 to 3 days, both of them. And it's very important to do this to maintain healthy skin integrity and just to maintain healthy diabetes behaviors. And we're going to get into this in depth on the next slide. But anyway, in summary, for a tubed pump, the three main parts are your pump, your infusion sets, and your reservoirs. All right, so this is a summary photo. So you can see on the person's body, they've got their infusion set on their body. There's some tubing leading to the pump where you can control your insulin delivery. And then that left part of the photo is showing that kind of horizontal slice into the body, showing you how that infusion set works. So infusion set sitting on the skin, cannula coming down into your fatty tissue, and then that is where your insulin is infusing. Okay, so like I said, why are we changing these so frequently? We need to know. So first and foremost, we need to prevent site irritation and infection. So we are wearing this infusion set in the same spot for 2 to 3 days, and that is a really long time for insulin to be infusing into the exact same spot. And right now when you're doing injections, you're rotating sites, and it's every couple of hours that you're giving an injection. With your pump, you're getting that basal insulin every 2 to 3 minutes. And so every 3 to 5 minutes. And so that tissue is constantly getting dripped into, and it can get irritated. So we do need to change it out every 2 to 3 days. It is also possible for that cannula site to get infected. It's pretty rare, but it is possible, especially for you teenagers who don't have great hygiene. So it is a possibility. So changing it frequently prevents infection. This picture on the bottom left is showing an infected pump site. They're not fun to deal with, so we want to prevent that. All right, next thing is we want to prevent lipohypertrophy. And this is a term that you may or may not have heard of previously, but essentially what lipohypertrophy is when you are injecting into the same location over and over and over and over, that fatty tissue that you're injecting into can become hardened, and you can get a hardened nodule under your skin. Now, the issue with this is those hardened nodules, those spots of lipohypertrophy, they have really poor insulin absorption. So if lipohypertrophy develops, you can't use that spot anymore to inject or to put your infusion sets. It can take a long time for that to go away. So we want to prevent it by doing frequent site changes. All right, next reason why we want to be changing out our reservoirs every 2 to 3 days is because insulin is best stored in glass, not plastic. And our vials, they come in glass. So when we take insulin out of the vials and put them into the reservoirs, which are all plastic, the insulin starts to degrade faster than when it is in the vial. We want good insulin, so we got to refresh it, refill every couple of days. And our last reason, there are many. Our last listed reason is because insulin is sensitive to temperature and movement. Now, I'm sure you've already heard the whole insulin is sensitive to temperature thing before, because I know you guys are all great people and you bring your insulin straight home from the pharmacy and you put it in the fridge. So now in a pump, why it's more important or something to really think about is when we're wearing our pump, we're wearing it against our body, and our bodies are typically hotter than our environment. So that insulin is warming up more than when your pen or vial, whatever you use, is in your purse, in your backpack, in your fanny pack, in your desk, wherever you keep your pens. Your insulin's getting warmer when it's closer to your body. Also, since you're wearing your pump on your body, it's moving with you. When you're standing up, sitting down, running, going up the stairs, that insulin is moving and jostling within the pump. And that movement degrades the insulin faster. So, because of that, we do need to refill our reservoirs every 2 to 3 days with fresh insulin so that that insulin is actively working at its best. We don't want to use old, worn out, tired insulin. No fun. So those are our big reasons to really keep in mind as to why it's so important to change our sites and change our reservoirs every 2 to 3 days. So for sites, site irritation, infection, lipohypertrophy, and for reservoirs, we're changing it because insulin should be stored in glass and because insulin is sensitive to temperature and movement. All right, so infusion set placement, where do we put these things? So infusion sets should be inserted into fatty tissue. Insulin is meant to be injected into fatty tissue. That's how it's best absorbed. And that's what you've been doing for your injection so far. You've been injecting into fatty tissue, probably whether you know it or not. So your infusion sets can be placed anywhere that you currently do injections. So some of the biggest, the most common areas, by far the most common area is the abdomen or love handle area, kind of that, upper back or lower back waistband area. A little bit more squish there. People will use that for their infusion sets. Upper buttocks is good. We don't want to sit directly on those infusion sets, so the upper portion is best. We can use our thighs and the back of our upper arms. Back of your upper arms, super common for injections. Also super common area for sensor placement. So if you are a sensor user or you're interested in sensor usage, back of arms is the most common place to put them. All right, so the key to infusion set placement is rotation, rotation, rotation. I like to think of our insertion sites as real estate, or our body has real estate. And in real estate, location, location, location is important. So for infusion sets, rotation, rotation, rotation is important. And again, it's to prevent all those side effects. To help us rotate, we do recommend, actually, we require you to choose 2 different areas of the body that you will rotate between. So you can choose abdomen and love handle area, you could choose abdomen and arms, but we do need you to choose 2 different locations that you will rotate between. Within each of those locations, you also should be rotating. So let's say you're using your belly. If you're using the left side of your belly button, you can go in a clockwise fashion. You can use that same kind of portion of your belly for a couple sites in a row, as long as you're rotating within that location. For your arm, you can go down and up. Do whatever you need to do, but rotation. And again, we're preventing our site irritation, infection, and lipohypertrophy. Okay. So choosing an infusion set. So both Tandem and Medtronic have a variety of options available. Infusion sets can really make a difference in how your blood sugars respond to pump therapy. So we want to choose an infusion set that fits your body. So, also an important thing, on this last point, if you start out with an infusion set and it doesn't work for you, your infusion sets can be changed. You don't need a prescription for these. These are all patient preference. So you just would simply call the pump company or wherever you get your supplies and say, hey, I'm getting X brand of infusion set right now. I want to get this brand instead, and they can send you the other ones the next time. Okay, so now what are the different types available? So the first one and the most common one is a straight infusion set. And this is the one that we were looking at in this image here, as well as the one that I was holding up here for you to look at. So what a straight infusion set is, the cannula comes in at a 90-degree angle. from that infusion set where it's connected to your body. So inserted at a 90-degree angle, cannula length is 6 millimeters or 9 millimeters, just depending how much fatty tissue you have. Most people use the 6 millimeter ones, and so this is a very common one to order. Forget if I said this, but this is a plastic flexible cannula on the straight infusion sets. Okay, hold on. PowerPoint isn't responding to me. There we go. All right, our second type is an angled infusion set. So angled infusion sets, they get inserted at an angle. They can be inserted anywhere between a 20 and 60-degree angle. So, if this is your skin, the 90-degree ones come in straight like that. Angled ones, you just simply put in at an angle. For the angled infusion sets, some of them are manual insertions, so you would yourself be holding that needle to insert it at the angle you prefer. And some of the angled infusion sets do come in those preloaded insertion devices, so there is flexibility with that as well. For our angled infusion sets, they are a longer plastic cannula. It's 13 millimeters, so about a little over double the length. And the purpose of that is, since you're going in so shallowly under the skin, we want to make sure it's long enough that it doesn't accidentally pull out, because that's no fun to have your insertion set pull out early. So it is a little bit longer. Why would you choose an angled infusion set? This is helpful for people with very low body fat. If you don't have a lot of squish to go 90 degrees into, then you got to go in at an angle. So, runners, swimmers, people who are very lean, angled infusion sets are a really great option. All right, and the last type is a steel needle infusion set. So the steel needle infusion set is also inserted at a 90-degree angle. It's 6 millimeters in length, and the biggest difference is this is, as it says in the title, a steel cannula. So for this, the steel needle gets inserted, does not retract, and does not leave a plastic cannula. The needle just stays in your skin, and that is how the insulin gets infused. Now, I'm sure you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds terrible. I don't want a needle sticking in me. Why would I ever want that? Well, let me tell you why. There are some pros. So the biggest pro is this cannula absolutely cannot kink under your skin. So the plastic cannulas, they're flexible. If you sit on it funny, if you knock it funny, that cannula can bend under your skin. And when plastic bends, it gets occluded. Insulin can't get in. So for some people, they have a lot of issues with occlusions. Sometimes it's because of site placement. Sometimes it's because of your body composition. But so if you do have issues with occlusions, using the steel infusion sets is a really good option. The other thing is, for children less than 3, this is the infusion set that we really want you to start on. And there's 2 different reasons for this. So for our kids less than 3, they're not body aware. They don't know where their body is in space. They don't pay attention to where their devices are. So they're whacking into things and banging in and sitting on things. So they're just not aware of where their infusion set is. Are they laying on it to occlude it? So we want to prevent occlusion at all costs in these children. The other reason, is because at their age, they can't communicate feelings of high blood sugar, low blood sugar, or at least can't communicate it well or reliably, consistently. And so if their infusion set were to kink or fall out or, something go wrong with it in any way, and their blood sugar starts rising rapidly, they're not on CGMs, you're not seeing that. They can't communicate it. We want to be able to prevent that. So if they're on a steel needle infusion set, we do know for sure that insulin is getting into their system. Important thing for the steel needle infusion sets, these must be changed every 2 days. Can't push it to 3 days. Has to be every 2 days. Quick thing, so the tubing that goes from the infusion set over to your pump, it does come in different lengths. Again, got to customize for your lifestyle. So different lengths are 18 inches, 23 inches, and 46. And 23 is the most common. If you don't specify the length, that is what they will send you. I've used 23 inches my whole life and it's worked very well. So if you do need a different length, though, it's possible. And the most fun, exciting part of it is the connection device actually comes in different colors, except for the steel needle ones. You just get steel. But if you get a plastic one, you can get pink, blue, or gray. So there's a little image of that. I'm a pink girl myself. I would say 9 months of the year I'm wearing pink, and in the winter I'll pick blue. I know winter lasts longer than 3 months here, but anyway, it's fun. You can jazz it up. I like to make my diabetes devices a little more exciting. I like to decorate them. Okay, so as I was saying before, those tubed pumps are the Medtronic and Tandem pumps. Omnipod is the third pump company. It's the third type of pump that is on the market, and it is not a tubed pump. What is it? It is a tubeless pump that's worn directly on the body. So you can see in this picture, this girl's name is Emily. Great name. And on her thigh there, you can see her Omnipod. So what it is your pump itself is called a pod. This is what a pod looks like, size of my hand. For my Dexcom users out there, it is about the same length as a Dexcom, about 1.5 times the width of your Dexcom. But so your pod is an all-in-one insertion set and reservoir. So you actually fill this pod with the insulin, then you attach it to your body. This is a picture of that. So that white part is the pod. The black part is your PDM, your personal diabetes manager. That's what you're using to control the pod. So as I had said, sorry, now the bullet point's coming up. You're going to load your pod with enough rapid-acting insulin for your 2 to 3 days and then insert. So the cannula that is used for Omnipods, it is a 6 millimeter plastic cannula, and it gets inserted at a 60-degree angle. This does not change. This is how it is. So just an FYI. One option for cannulas on this. And this I kind of mentioned, the pod, it's doing all the work over there, but then to control it, you use your personal diabetes manager or your PDM. Okay, so hold on. All right, we are getting into the nitty gritty. Different pump settings. How do pumps run? How do you make them do their thing? So first things first, we have basal rates. So what our basal rate is, again, this is replacing our daily basal insulin injection. So we are replacing our Lantus, Basaglar, Levemir, Tresiba, Toujeo insulin. What's the purpose of it? Again, this is a review, but gotta pound it in, make sure we all understand it. So our basal rate, our basal insulin, it's acting as that doorstop to allow glucose stores from your muscle and your liver to get into the cells for energy. So it's a doorstop. So in your pump, since you are using rapid-acting insulin only, the way that we program it is we program that rapid-acting insulin to infuse in a rate. We do an hourly rate, so it's programmed as units per hour. So the way that we calculate our dose is we take your basal dose, that your current basal dose, and divide it by 24 for 24 hours a day. That gives us our units per hour rate. And what's nice is since you are programming this hourly in your pump, you actually can vary what that rate is to meet your body's metabolic needs. So you might have found at this time in your life, maybe at night you tend to go low more frequently than during the day. And that's just because, well, your body just doesn't need as much of that background energy. So your liver and your muscles aren't putting out as much glucose overnight. On injections, sometimes that makes it difficult to figure out your dose for your basal insulin. And what's so nice about pumps is you can just change your basal rate so that overnight you're getting less basal insulin. During the day, you're getting more, just to meet your body where it's at. So this is just a little image of that. So on here, the red line is our basal rate. And you can see just from where the notches are that the basal rate is a little bit lower overnight than during the day. And this is a really, really common thing for many people. Purple is your bolus doses. Your bolus doses, sorry. So just as an example, how we calculate that basal rate, just to start you off, if your current basal dose is 9 units, we do 9 divided by 24, and that brings us to 0.375 units per hour. Okay, so a nice feature about pumps is you do have the ability to use what's called a temporary basal rate. What this is you can temporarily increase or decrease your basal rate to accommodate whatever is happening right now. So if you are, more active than usual, if you are sick, if you're stressed, and just temporarily your blood sugars are requiring, more or less insulin, you can temporarily increase or decrease that basal rate. So the way it's calculated, it is calculated in a percentage of your current basal rate setting. And so a couple examples of how this works is, let's say you're sick, your blood sugar is pumping out those fight or flight hormones, and your blood sugar is running higher. Well, you can run a temporary basal rate of 120%. So it's a 20% increase from your current setting. Run it for 12 hours. Just have it run for a while, keep those blood sugars down as much as you can. Another example is, if you have a soccer game and oh my gosh, every time that I'm playing soccer and I'm running up and down that field, I know my blood sugar always runs lower. You're always going low. You're trying to drink your juice boxes and your Powerade. To make your life a little bit easier, you could use a reduced temporary basal rate. Let's say you'd run it at 50% of your current settings. You could run it for 3 hours. Start it an hour before your game, hour during, run an hour after, and try to prevent some of that hypoglycemia that you've experienced. So temp basal rates, they are super handy to use, great feature for pumps. And our last little thing about basal rates for you, there is a setting that we program called our maximum basal rate or our max rate. And it's a safety feature. It's just to keep you from accidentally increasing your basal rate too much, either when you are using a temp basal rate or when you are changing your settings. It's just that safety feature. We don't want you to get too much basal. When we are setting up your pump initially, hint, this is on your pump worksheets, this does get programmed as double your basal rate. That's our basic setting. Let's see. I think that covers it on basal rates. Okay, so moving on. Our pump settings dose calculator. So this is a fantastic feature of pumps. One of the big draws of pumps is having a dose calculator. What does it do? It calculates your recommended bolus dose. It's great. Helps take some of the brain work away from diabetes. So our dose calculator, it uses 5 different things to calculate your dose. So it is thinking about so many things to help make an educated decision. Recommendation, really. So the first thing that it's looking at, it is looking at our insulin to carb ratio, or our ICR. And our insulin to carb ratio, it's simply how much insulin we're using for carbohydrate coverage. You're using this every day, in and out, every time you're eating, it's your carb ratio. So the really big important thing is when you are programming your pump, it is programmed as in whole units, as 1 unit per X number of carbs. This can be a little confusing if you are a half unit doser. I'll explain this in the next little bullet point, but just to make sure you understand, it is programmed in whole units, but that doesn't mean that the pump is delivering in whole units. Pumps actually deliver down to 1/10 to 100th of a unit, so it's giving super precise doses. It's just simply that for the calculator to run, it needs whole unit ratios. So in this example, if currently your carb ratio is a half unit per 15 grams, in the pump, you program it as 1 unit per 30 grams. So it seems a little scary seeing that big number change, and it's the same ratio though. 30 divided by 1 is 30, 15 divided by 0.5 is 30. So they're the same ratio, it's just used to calculate that dose. Okay, now our insulin sensitivity factor. This is the second piece it uses. We also call this our ISF. And this is how much 1 unit of insulin will lower your blood sugar level. So this gets programmed as 1 unit per X milligrams per deciliter, but 1 unit per blood sugar level. And the way that we figure this one out is using our correction scale. So right now, let's say your correction scale is 1 unit for every 50 points over 150. That correction scale is telling us 1 unit is changing my blood sugar by 50 points. So we would program our ISF, or our sensitivity, as 50. Same thing, this is programmed in those whole unit ratios. So if your correction scale is in half units, then let's just go through this example. If your correction scale is a half unit for every 40 points over 150, then our sensitivity factor is going to be 80, because a half unit for 40 points is the same ratio as 1 unit for 80 points. All right, third part of the dose calculator is using our target blood sugar. So this is simply when the pump is going to start providing correction doses, when you're above whatever blood sugar level. So let's say your current correction scale is 1 unit for every 80 points over 150. Our target blood sugar will be 150. That's when we're going to start getting corrections. Now, as you progress in your pump therapy, you might choose to lower that target, just because you can get those really precise, tiny doses. So you could change your target blood sugar to 120. You'll get a little bit extra correction, bring that blood sugar closer down and into range, and it's just a little bit safer than doing that with pens and syringes. All right, fourth thing that is in the dose calculator, it is our insulin action time. This is how long our rapid acting insulin is active in our body. So this is all related to our 3-hour rule. So I'm sure you're very familiar with this at this point in your life, but our 3-hour rule is simply stating that if it's been within 3 hours of you receiving rapid acting insulin, you shouldn't get another correction dose, because you still have insulin active in your body trying to bring that blood sugar down into range. So in our pump, we program what is that time frame. Most people, we start you at 3 hours. That's what you're used to using, but the pumps can vary anywhere between 2 and 6 units. And you can change that, if you find that you burn through insulin faster, you can reduce that insulin action time, but we typically start you at 3 hours. Okay, and then the last piece that the pump is looking at when calculating your doses is your max bolus. And so this, again, is another safety feature that keeps you from accidentally over-bolusing. It's very easy, especially as pumps are moving to touch screen. It's super easy to add an extra digit to your carb count. The number of times I've, instead of 17 grams, I put in 177. It happens. So this is a nice protective feature that it's like, hey, are you really meaning to give that much insulin? You might want to think about that again. So that's a nice protective feature. Just a little thing to loop back to, I forgot to say this previously, sorry, with your insulin action time. One of the most fantastic things about pumps is, since the pump is keeping in mind when your last dose was, it is going to reduce doses that are stacked up really close to each other. So it's going to keep that active insulin in mind, at the forefront of its mind when it's calculating, to make sure that you don't over bolus when you're stacking doses like that. So it is a really nice feature. It makes snacking, makes Thanksgiving a lot easier. This is just a little picture of kind of how that calculation looks. So that front line, or that top line, blood sugar is 200. For this person, they would get 2 units. Then it has their active insulin adjustment. They still have 0.7 units on board. For their carb dose for 60 grams, they're going to get 6 units. So with that, they're going to get 7.3 units total. So that's kind of how it uses that active insulin time. All right, quick note about pump settings before we move on. The dose calculator only works as good as your settings are. The dose calculator is not an all-knowing Oz wizard. It doesn't just say, yeah, I'll give you 7.2 units. It's a calculator. It's going off of what your ratios are set as. So if your settings are not what your body's needing, dose calculator is not going to work very well. So with that, so this is saying your pump is not a fairy godmother. It's not going to fix everything. You still got to put some work into this dose calculator. So it's super important that we are frequently assessing our doses, that we're making changes to our pump settings as needed, because again, our dose calculator is only as good as the settings are. So we want to make sure that those settings are meeting our body's needs. A quick note too, just before we get too deep into this, going into pump therapy, a lot of people a lot of people decide to pursue a pump because they do think that a pump will drastically improve their blood sugars, it'll make their diabetes go away. And we always want to make sure that we are staying realistic, and we know that pump therapy can make diabetes management way easier. It can take a lot of the burden off of your shoulders, but it doesn't take diabetes away. And so in connection with that, some of the pumps on the market right now, they are utilizing what is called hybrid closed loop therapy. And what that means is the pump is connecting to a continuous glucose monitor that's on your body, and those two are talking to each other. And the pump is using those CGM values and trends to determine if you need more or less basal insulin. So it's automatically adjusting your basal rates depending on your CGM values and trends. And with that, a lot of people think, ooh, automation, that takes my diabetes away. It doesn't. It doesn't. You still need to put work in. Again, I don't want to turn you away from pumps. I think they're great. I've been on a pump for, over 15 years. But we just have to make sure we do understand we still have to put work into it. The other thing too that I just like to emphasize here is right now those pumps that are on the market, they have hybrid closed loop therapy. And a lot of people will hear things on, commercials and media about how there are closed loop or artificial pancreases on the market. And that's not true. What a closed loop pump or an artificial pancreas looks like is when you're completely hands off. So the pump would have glucagon in it. It would be automatically bolusing for your meals without your input. And, it would essentially be doing the entire role of your pancreas, AKA why it's called an artificial pancreas. So I just always like to drive that home too, just as an educational point when you're hearing about these in, social media and on the news. That's not what's on the market right now. You still need to do some human input. So, all right. Thank you for letting me get that off my chest. Okay. So just to round this out, there are pros and cons of pumping, and we want to consider both the pros and the cons before jumping into this, new way of managing our diabetes. So, of course, let's do the pros first. All right. So one of the big pros, fewer pokes. We're putting in our infusion set every 2 to 3 days instead of giving injections 4 to 8 times a day. It's great. Having that dose calculator just has so much less brain work, less fatigue in the mind. It's a nice feature. Big pro is your insulin is readily available, meaning you've got insulin physically attached to your body. So when you are snacking and grazing, it's super easy to just type in your pump what you're having, get a little bolus for that snack. So it's a lot easier to cover all of your carbs, and it's also easier to pre-bolus. As I'm sure you know, the rapid-acting insulin that's on the market right now, it starts working about 15 minutes after it's injected. So best practice is to give your boluses for food 15 minutes before you start eating. And that can be really hard. It's honestly, I think, one of the hardest diabetes behaviors to really get on top of. But with a pump, it's actually like just so much easier because you can just type it into your pump, set a timer, start eating in 15 minutes. So that is a nice pro of pumping. Huge thing is that you do get those precise micro doses. So again, the pump is going to calculate and deliver your dose down to a tenth or a hundredth of a unit, depending on the brand of pump you use. Very nice for our young kids on tiny, tiny doses. Another great thing, ability to set those different basal rates throughout the day, which we talked about. If your body needs less basal insulin when you're sleeping or during different times of the day, you just set the pump to give you less, and it's really nice. And of course, our temporary basal rates, great pro for illness or activity. Customizable alerts and alarms. Sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I have to remember to change this and do that and do that and that. It's nice you can set all these different alerts and alarms on your pumps. So you can say, hey, let me know when I have this amount of insulin left so I don't forget to change that reservoir. Hey, let me know when it's been 72 hours since I inserted my site so I remember to change it. Another great thing is you can also program in it meal dose reminders. So you can say, hey, I normally eat breakfast between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. If I haven't had a bolus by then, alert me. And so that's a really nice thing too. Little reminders just to help nudge us in the direction of fantastic diabetes management. And then one of my favorite things, honestly, about pumps, I use this probably at least every other day, is extended boluses. Extended boluses are extremely helpful for high fat, high protein meals. And why these are helpful is when we eat meals that are high in fat and protein, it can delay and prolong how quickly our body breaks down carbohydrates into sugar. So you've probably experienced the lovely pizza effect on blood sugars at this point, where you'll bolus for your pizza, eat your pizza, 30 minutes later you're low, so you treat that low, 2 hours later you're sky high, and that's because pizza's super high fat. And so you give your insulin, but then those carbs aren't breaking down into sugar, so you go low. And then they get broken down into sugar 2 to 3 hours later, so then you're high. So extended boluses can be super helpful because you can say to the pump, hey, for my pizza, I'm eating 60 grams of pizza. Bolus half of it right now. Give me the second half of that bolus in 2 to 3 hours or over a period of 2 to 3 hours. And it can be really helpful just, stabilizing everything. All right, moving on to the cons. We always got to keep the cons at the front of the mind when making decisions. So biggest one for everybody is that you are attached to a medical device 24/7. Again, when we were talking about infusion sets, you can disconnect at the site if you need to be disconnected from your pump, but you really want to minimize it because if you remember, we're only having that rapid acting insulin in that pump. So when you disconnect, your timeline of having active insulin in the body starts ticking pretty quickly. So we recommend removing your pump for a maximum of 2 hours. Maximum, preferably much less than that. I personally, as a pump user, only take my pump off when I'm showering or in a hot tub, that type of thing. Otherwise, I just leave it on all the time. Con, you do have that risk of skin infection and irritation that we've talked about before. Expense is a really big one for many people. This does vary by insurance plan, but if you were to get a pump and you're paying out of pocket, month to month, it is significantly more expensive than injection therapy. So this is something, before you get into the ordering process of getting a pump, I really do recommend that you either call your insurance company or log into your website and review what their coverage is. Little tidbits what to look for. Most insurance plans will cover pumps under your medical benefit, and they'll bill your pump supplies as durable medical equipment or DME. So I would look into your insurance plan. I would recommend you look into your insurance plan, see what your DME coverage is, because Some insurance plans will say, hey, we'll cover your DME at 80% all the time. Some will say, nope, you pay 100% until you reach your deductible. They all vary. So I would look into that just to really get a good idea of, if you have good coverage or not. Another con of pump therapy is you do need more supplies. You don't just need insulin and pen needles. You need the pump, and then you need infusion sets. You need your reservoirs, as well as you need a backup plan and backup supplies. Because if your pump were to ever fail, your body still needs insulin. So we need to keep pens and syringes and pen needles, all that at home, as well as our backup supply or a backup plan and supply. Yeah, we froze again. There we go. For pumping, another con, we do want you to be doing more frequent blood sugar checks. A lot of people, when they get on a pump, they like technology, so they're also on a sensor, so then it's fine as long as you're opening your sensor and looking at it. But the reasoning why we want you paying attention to that blood sugar more frequently is to make sure that pump is working. Make sure our blood sugar is not unexpectedly getting higher. And that leads to the biggest con. You are at an increased risk of developing ketones and developing diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA. And we're going to get into this more in depth in the next couple of slides. Okay, quick water break. Hold on. Okay, so why are we at a higher risk of ketone development and DKA? To figure this out, we got to do a little review again. So, ketones review. So, we're going to bring it back to the beginning. So, our body needs energy. And our primary source of energy is, shout it out, sugar. And if we don't have sugar, again, we get that from the food that we eat and our liver and muscle stores. Our secondary source of energy is fat. So, if our body can't use sugar for energy, it starts breaking down fat for energy. Now, ketones are the byproduct of fat. What that means is similar to how we eat carbohydrates, our body breaks down the carbohydrates into sugar molecules, and that's released into the bloodstream. When our body breaks down fat, it breaks it down into ketones. That means they're the byproduct of fat, and the ketone molecules get released into the bloodstream. So here's a lovely image that is portraying this. So there's that yellow bubbly fat cell, and it's getting broken down, and ketones are being released into the bloodstream. So why does this happen? Why does our body do this? So if we actually don't have enough sugar in our blood because we're not eating and drinking carbs, we're vomiting, we're sick for whatever reason, if we do not have enough sugar in the bloodstream to be used for energy, the body will break down fat cells and use the ketones for energy. We call these starvation ketones. These are a little more rare or less common, I guess, than like typical ketones. But so this is reason number one, not enough sugar in the blood. Reason number two, and this is the reason that we focus on this in this presentation and when we're using a pump, is if there is not enough insulin available to open those receptor doors and let the sugar in, the body is going to break down fat so that it can use the ketones for energy. So that's the second reason that we break down fat for energy, is if there's just not enough insulin available. Okay. So why are we at higher risk? So remember, in our pump, we are using our rapid-acting insulin to meet our metabolic need. That pump is giving us that tiny little dose every 3 to 5 minutes, continuously in the background. That basal rate every 3 to 5 minutes, as we're getting little spurts of insulin, that's acting as our doorstop, keeping that cellular door open to let the sugar in. And again, our basal rate on our pump is replacing our basal insulin injection. So here's that lovely photo. We went over it before, how insulin is used to open those cell doors and let glucose in for energy. So if there's ever a disruption in our insulin delivery in the pump, meaning our infusion set is kinked under the skin, our infusion set is leaking, it's irritated, maybe it's bleeding, if our tubing gets pulled out, if our actual site gets ripped out. I have definitely ripped out sites pulling my pants up before. If our tubing breaks, my cat has chewed through my tubing. She likes to do it when I'm sleeping, which is very naughty and very mean. But if there's ever a disruption in insulin getting into your body, you have 3 to 4 hours before that insulin is fully out of your body and you're out of insulin. There are no more keys to open those doors. So that body's going to start breaking down fat for energy. So as I was just saying, you're not going to get, if you don't have that basal rate, those door stops are slowly going to get kicked out of place. Receptor doors start closing. That's no good. So because of this, DKA can start developing within 4 hours of that insulin interruption. So we want to be on high alert of unexpectedly high blood sugars. So this is the big thing. If our blood sugar is unexpectedly high, we must check ketones. Very, very important. Because if we do not check for ketones, we can't treat them properly and we can get very, very sick and need to go to the hospital. We don't want that. So our big guidelines, if we have an unexpected blood sugar over 300, we didn't just eat Fruit Loops. Our blood sugar's over 300. We're like, what the heck? I don't know what's going on. Check ketones. Check to make sure, hey, is my insulin doing its job? Check for the ketones. Lovely ketone vial and strips. If our ketones come back positive, so if they come back small, moderate, or large, we always assume the pump is not working. Why? Well, our body's not getting insulin because ketones are developing. If we don't have insulin, we can't use glucose for energy, body breaks down fat. So we always assume the pump is not working if we have positive ketones. If we have positive ketones, our main action points. So first, we are going to give a correction dose with pen or syringe. And we're going to keep using a pen or syringe until those ketones come back negative because we want to make sure that insulin actually got under our skin and into the fatty tissue. So pen or syringe until ketones come back negative again. And then we want to change our insertion set. Got to make sure that is not the problem, that's not the cause of those ketones. Now, a really important thing to hear is if our ketones do come back positive while using a pump, we are always going to treat our diabetes first. Give that correction dose first. Let that insulin start working and bringing down that blood sugar and breaking down those ketones. So treat diabetes first, troubleshoot the pump second. Then we're going to look at the pump. What's wrong with it? Why is it not working? Again, not doing this has led to many pumpers being hospitalized for DKA, so please follow the guidelines. It will help you in the long run. We don't want to be that guy. Okay, so on our next slide here, this is really getting into our DKA prevention decision tree. So this looks very similar to the decision tree that you have at home for injections, but this one is specific for pumpers. So we're going to run through it. So at the top here is also just to let you know, it is set up the same way. Top is when you check for ketones. Left side is if ketones come back negative. Right side is if they come back positive. So back to the top. So our blood sugar is over 300. We don't know why. We're checking for ketones. Okay, so let's say our ketones come back negative. We're going to go to that left side of the tree. Next box down. Take a look at that infusion set. Take a look at your site. Take a look at your pump. Do they look okay? Are they cracked? Are they connected? Are they leaking? Does it physically look like it should be delivering insulin? If it looks fine, no visible problems with the pump, go ahead, give your correction dose through the pump. Looks like it's fine. Sometimes we just have high blood sugars. After that, we're not going to eat carbs for an hour. If in an hour our blood sugar is not coming down at all, change your infusion set. If it starts to come down, great, that insulin is working now. Keep using your pump. Just keep an eye on everything. Make sure that blood sugar keeps coming down. You might want to check for ketones again later on just to make sure that you don't have ketones that day. All right, back up to the top. We checked for ketones. They came back negative. We not troubleshooted. We looked at the pump, took a look at it. Physically, we can see what the problem is. My tubing got ripped out. Great. We're going to treat diabetes first, give our correction dose with a pen or syringe. Then we're going to fix whatever that problem is. Changing your infusion set never hurts. Fresh site always helps. So change your infusion set and then fix whatever that visible problem was. With that, we're also going to check for ketones again later that day, make sure they did not develop. Monitor that blood sugar closely, make sure it does come down appropriately. Okay, back up to the top. Our blood sugar is over 300. We don't know why. We check for ketones. They come back positive this time. So they came back small, moderate, or large. We're going to go to the right side of the tree. And what's our first thing? Treat diabetes first. So we're going to give that correction dose with a pen or syringe, not with that pump. Because remember, if we have positive ketones, we assume the pump is not working. Give that correction dose with a pen or syringe. So then the next line down is the same as your decision tree for injections. When you have ketones, you are more insulin resistant. You need more insulin. So if our ketones come back small or moderate, we're going to give our normal correction dose plus 50% extra. Some people like to think of this as 1.5 times my dose, 150% of my dose, or my normal dose and 50% extra, however you need to remember it. So, for example, let's say your normal correction dose is 2 units. If we have small or moderate ketones, we're going to add an extra 50%, so an extra 1 unit for a total of 3 units. If they come back large, we're just going to double the dose. So if your normal correction dose is 2 units, we'll double it, give 4 units. From there, we're going to push fluids because our ketones get released out of the body through our urinary tract. So we need fluids to keep peeing. We also need fluids to keep peeing to check for ketones. So push fluids. We're going to change that infusion site and troubleshoot our pump because we troubleshoot the pump second. From there, we're going to keep monitoring our blood sugars. We're going to check ketones with every void. Hopefully you can pee every 3 hours. That'd be great because following that 3-hour rule, then you can give another correction. But with that, when you check for ketones again, we're going to rinse and repeat. Whatever that ketone result comes back as, we're going to go back to the dose calculation boxes, figure out what extra high dose you need, and keep going through. We want to keep checking for ketones until ketones come back negative twice, at least 3 hours apart, just to really confirm that ketones are gone out of there. Sometimes, after you cycle through this a couple of times, I always love to say rinse and repeat. If you have cycled through this a couple of times and you still have large ketones, you're feeling concerned, please call us. We will help you. We will gladly help you over the phone as we can. So feel free to call us if you need to. So big thing for this is the next class that you would take if you decide to get a pump is your pump start class. We'll talk about this at the end, but at that class, we will review the decision tree in depth, so you might want to study it. All right, couple FAQs. Does the pump hurt? No. Putting an infusion set feels very similar to an insulin injection, very similar to CGM insertion. Once that needle is out, it shouldn't really cause any discomfort. If you are using one of the steel needle infusion sets, I've used them before. They didn't cause me any discomfort afterwards. Do you need to sleep with your pump on? Yep. Our pump, we are wearing 24/7. We need that basal rate. We need it in the background. Again, we can remove that pump for short periods of time, but it should never be off for more than 2 hours. That's cutting it way too close to having all insulin out of the body. So as far as sleeping with our pump on, yeah, there we go. Sleeping with the pump on, there's a couple options what to do with it. If you have a tubed pump, really. So some people will clip it. All the pumps come with clips. They'll clip it to their PJ pants, put it in your PJ pant pocket. I like to put little snaps in my pockets so that the pocket gets a little bit smaller. And then my pump doesn't slide out when I roll around. Some people like to just lay it next to them in the bed and it kind of free flows, and that works for them too. I have done that as well. My pump has even fallen off the bed and it didn't rip my infusion set out, so free flowing is fine. And then some people will wear a pump belt. And so I think I have a picture of this. Yeah. So this is a really common one. It's called a SPI belt, SPI belt. And this is like a little, not latex, neoprene fanny pack, and it has a little spot cut out so you can ride your tubing through it. So some people will wear this at night, super comfy. They'll wear it during the day too to hold their pump if they don't have pockets. So a lot of people use spy belts or another brand. I'm a big proponent of altering clothing to fit my pump. After 15 years of wearing a tubed device, I've developed many different pieces of clothing with pockets in it. So that's also super helpful if you are crafty with a needle and thread. Putting in some pockets into clothing is great. There's also lots of different like Etsy stores. There's different websites. Just Google pump clothing and you'll find some cool different items out there. All right, can I exercise with my pump? Yes, absolutely. And exercise can be a lot easier blood sugar management wise with a pump because you do have the temporary basal rate option. If you want to, some people in like hockey or football, I couldn't figure out the name of that one. In high contact sports, wrestling, people will choose to take their pump off during that time. Again, maximum 2 hours. And do the pumps break easily? Nope. They also come with warranties, so if something does happen, just call the pump company and they should replace it. Little tiny note here, this will be discussed in depth in the pump and sensor options video, but most pumps come with a 4-year warranty. So if something happens within 4 years, you can get it replaced at no cost. Okay, how do we know if my kid is ready for a pump? Transitioning to a pump is a big decision, so we do want to make sure that our kids are on board and ready for a pump. So first things first, do they actually want a pump? Or is this your provider, or is this the parents, or anybody else in their lives? Are they the ones that are kind of pressuring them? That's not helpful. Your kid is the one who's wearing that device 24/7, so they need to really want it themselves. Another thing is we do want them to be at least relatively open to sharing with people that they have diabetes, or they're okay with people asking them questions, because diabetes in general is what you call kind of an invisible disease. When you start wearing diabetes tech, pumps, sensors, you have it, it becomes visible. And I'm sure that you Dexcom, or not Dexcom, sorry, brand drop, CGM users, I'm sure you have noticed that people ask you questions about it. They can see what's on your arm. They want to know what it is. And the same thing happens with pumps. People want to know what they are. They're curious beings. Pretty much for everybody listening, I think, yeah, our patient population, little piece of advice, ask your parents what a pager is so you can understand what it is. People will ask you all the time if you have a pager on you. Okay, we also need to be ready and willing to do frequent blood sugar checks. Again, that's to make sure that the pump is doing its job, we're getting the insulin that we need, and we're not having any unexpected highs. We want to be able to count carbs. That is how pumps work, is off of carb ratios. So if you are managing the pump, if somebody else is managing your child's pump, we need to make sure that they are able to count carbs. And this is a pretty big thing right now in today's world. We do really need you to have access to a computer and internet at home so that you can upload the pump to your respective pump's website, so that here at the clinic we can see your pump data. Now, this is for, let's say it's been a month since your last visit with your endocrinologist and you are just having so much difficulty. You need to have some doses changed. Well, for us to make dose changes for a pump, we need to physically see the pump reports. We need to see when boluses are given, what are your settings, what are your basal rates. We need to see it. So we need you to be able to upload that pump to your respective website. So something to really think about. If this is a problem, please let us know before ordering your pump so we can talk about different options for how we can work around it. I think that's it. All right, so last couple things here. Getting ready for your pump. So we always want to have 2 people trained to use the pump. If one person gets trained and something happens to them, well, we're out of luck. So we want 2 people trained at all times. As your child gets older, they're going to become more independent and they're going to want to control that pump themselves. That's great. Independence is fabulous. We want people to grow into their diabetes management. But as they get older, you never want to walk away completely as the parent. You do want to stay engaged in their diabetes cares. So as they get older, this could be daily or weekly check-ins, just saying, hey, have we bolused for dinner yet? How are things going? I'm being awkward. I don't have a teenage child, so you can figure out the phrasing, but it is good to have regular check-ins. It's also really important that if your child is independent with that pump, that you practice using it so that if something were to happen where they're not able to control the pump, you can step in and do it. And this is just really going off of that. Parents may need to take over cares throughout the life of your child, really, in times of illness, in times of depression, or if your child is showing, non-consistency. I don't know if that's a word, but if they're not being consistent in their diabetes cares, you might have to step in and help them out. So stay up to date on how to use that pump. A little thing about timing of pump therapy. So if you are starting a pump, we want to do it at a time that we have plenty of time and space to think about new things and learn how to do new things. We don't want to start a pump right before vacation or right before, going camping or going to camp, moving, that type of thing, because we don't want to be scatterbrained. We want to be focused. And the big thing too here, we do want to make sure that we have realistic goals and expectations going into having a pump. As we've talked about earlier in this, pump therapy does not take away the diabetes burden completely. Does it reduce the burden? Yeah, usually does. For most people it does, but it doesn't take it away completely. We still have to count carbs. We still have to monitor our blood sugars. We have to put those into the dose calculator. You still have to be doing actions. It's just less brain work, and it can be very helpful. But again, we just want to be realistic. It doesn't take away all diabetes woes. Another thing really to stay realistic about is after starting your pump, it is super common to have a lot of glucose variability. You might have a lot higher blood sugars than usual, could be low, it's usually higher blood sugars after starting. And it's just because your body is adapting to being on one type of insulin. It's been on two types of insulin for however long you've had diabetes. So it can take a little bit for your body to really adjust, as well as when we're calculating those pump settings, it's just based off of what you're doing with injections. And so they might need to get tweaked once we've switched types of insulin therapy. Another thing just to stay realistic about is remembering that being on a pump does not completely take away pokes. You do have to insert your sites every 2 to 3 days, but then also if we have ketones, we're going to be giving injections with syringe or pen. If you take a pump vacation, you'll be using injections. So remembering that injections will still be a part of your diabetes life. All right, so how do you know which pump is right for you? As we said before, there are those 3 options. So the first thing that we want you to do is we need you to watch the pump and sensors options video that is on our website, or it's going to be linked into My Children's Message for you. But you do want to see this video. We will go into detail about the different pumps that are on the market so you can make an educated decision about what you want to use. Because again, usually a 4-year decision. You've got that 4-year warranty. We'll talk about this more in that pump and sensors options video, but just throwing it out there too. Quick little throw out is the 3 again are the Medtronic. The current model is called the 770G. There is the tandem pump. The current model is called the T-Slim X2. And then the third one is our Omnipod, and the current model is called the Dash. Okay, so determining which pump is right for you, another really big thing, go to the pump company website, medtronic.com, tandem.com. Actually, that's probably not right. I think it's tandemdiabetes.com. Anyway, Google it. Go to the pump company's website and learn more about their respective pumps. Each company actually has a variety of pumps available. So some people might find that one is better for them than the other. So definitely look into it, do some research on those company websites to figure out which one is best for you. Now, this third point. I love this one. A lot of people skip this step, and I don't recommend skipping it. It's really, really helpful. Reach out to the local pump company representatives. Talk to them. Say, this is my insurance. They can tell you, hey, it's normally covered. It's not covered. And they also know these pumps in such detail. They're so good at explaining them and how they can benefit your child. Excuse me. So I definitely recommend reaching out to the pump company representatives before really moving forward, so you can really discuss with them, make sure that this is a company you want to, kind of be linked with for the next 4 years. So in the pump and sensors options video, we will list off the different representatives' phone numbers and emails, so you can reach out to them. Okay, and the last one is, in this scenario, social media can be your friend. Searching hashtags on, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I don't know if there's anything cooler than that right now. Those are the three I know. Twitter. Search hashtags of the different pump companies, the pump models, and it'll just populate a bunch of people, real people in the real world wearing these pumps. And that can be really helpful, just visualizing it and seeing it on other people. You'll also get real person testimonials. That using Instagram, honestly, was what helped me determine which pump I wanted to go with when I was due for my last upgrade. So I do think that this is very helpful. All right, guys, we've made it. This is the final slide. So the pump ordering process, there's a couple steps. All right, first is completing Pump 101, which, boom, check, you did it. Next thing, we talked about this at the top. We need you to complete the pump assessment worksheets and then send them to the diabetes educators through My Children's, or you can fax them to our fax number there, 651-220-6064. If you've never sent a message to the diabetes educators in My Children's, you can actually just send a message to any of your providers. They all get routed to us. So you can just send a message to anybody that's linked to the diabetes clinic and it'll get to us. After we receive your pump assessment worksheets, we will review them. We'll make sure everything looks okay. And if everything looks okay, then we will reach out to the clinician that you last saw, make sure that they are comfortable with you getting a pump. Big thing here is you do have to have been seen within the last 3 months, so just make sure that you have had a follow-up recently. Once we've completed all of those steps, we will order that pump. Another thing about being realistic, it can take a while to get the pump. Insurance can be a hassle, so it can take 2 to 3 months. It's not usually that long, but it can take 2 to 3 months to get that pump, so just, be patient. Call your insurance. They're usually the one that's being the hang up. Once you actually get your pump, we do need you to take a class with us called Pump Start. So you can either call us 651-220-6624 and just leave a voicemail saying you want to schedule your pump start. With this, at that class, we will review blood sugars and doses to determine what your pump settings are to start. So it is really important at your pump start appointment to bring 1 to 2 weeks of detailed blood sugar and insulin records so that we can make an educated calculation of your doses. There we go. And then after that, you'll also want to contact your pump company, find out who your pump trainer is, and they will train you physically on how that pump works, get you started. All right, after you start your pump, you're going to follow up with us 2 to 4 weeks to make sure that pump is going okay. As we talked about in the last slide, there can be a lot of glucose variability after starting a pump. So we want you to come back within that first month to make sure things are going okay and we can make some dose changes. Little side note here, just so you know, whenever you start a pump or sensor, from that point on, we do bill you for download and interpretation of pump and sensor data. This really doesn't ever get to the patient side. Insurance just typically covers it. But if you're that person who likes to look at your explanation of benefits and look at every single code that you've been billed for, that's what this new code is for. It's for pump and sensor download and interpretation. Okay, so that is it, you guys. Thank you for joining me for Pump 101. It's been a pleasure for the last hour, hour and a half. I don't know how long I've been rambling at this point. Don't have a clock. But thank you for joining me. I love teaching this class. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned a lot, got some insight and education about our pump process. And I hope that you, well, if you want a pump, I hope you pursue a pump and get one that you like. But yeah, please reach out to us via My Children's if you do have any concerns or questions. If you want to chat about different pump options after you watch the pump options video, please feel free to reach out to us and we can help determine which one is best for your child if need be. So reach out via My Children's. You can give us a call, whatever you need to do. And until next time, it's been lovely. Thanks so much, everybody. Technical difficulties. I don't know how to stop it. Okay, got it. Bye.